Okay, so welcome everybody. This is the first one of these back since I guess it was October was our last one. We took a couple of months off there for holidays, so welcome back. It's good to be back here, back on with the group here. So tonight we have Janet Elliott, who is our guest speaker. Everybody say hey to Janet. And so I met her out at Dreamforce last year, and she agreed to come and talk to us about the Salesforce developer certification, how to go from not even knowing what Salesforce is to being able to get certified, and just some tips and tricks along the way. So without further ado, I'm gonna just turn it over to you, Janet, and let you run with it.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Familiar faces on the call here. So I will go ahead and share my screen as I do this, and then let me put this in. You can see my deck.
Yes.
And put this into presentation mode. So that look good? Awesome. So thanks for having me. I am going to talk today about 0 to PD1. That's like my little tagline here. And I came up with 4 sort of components of my approach to 0 to PD1: motivation, mindset, mastery, and mentor. So let's get started, and I will get into that. So I'm Janet Elliott. I'm the manager of solution architecture at a partner called Kicksaw. Ben, who's joining us here, also works there as a solution architect. I'm an MVP this year, super grateful for that honor. I run the Sacramento Women in Tech community group here in Sacramento, 12-time certified application architect, and was a part of a really fun project called Legends of Low Code, which is a show you can go check out on Salesforce Plus. That was about a year ago that came out, but it's a real fun like reality show that I was on that's fun to watch. And also, just I'm sure most of you know here, my Twitter handle is It's Me Janet E. I'm super active on socials, both Twitter and LinkedIn, so would love to connect. Love to connect with you there. So before I actually start, I kind of want to take a moment to explain why I even came up with this presentation in the first place. One of the things I talk about when I give a talk on finding your voice, like being a speaker in the Salesforce ecosystem, one of the tips I give is that you need to speak about something you're passionate about. And this topic, because I went through this, I have a story to tell. I kind of had some ups and downs in my PD1 journey, and I thought that would be helpful for other people to know that they're not alone if they're, trying to decide if they want to take it on. Maybe they're frustrated in the middle of it, they want to give up, like what that journey looked like for me, and kind of looking back, what some tips I have are for people who are taking it on. And so what I want you to walk away with this is that you can do this. It's going to be hard. You're going to have some fortitude to get through this. You're going to have some ups and downs where you're going to get frustrated, but I would like people to walk away with this knowing that they can come from a non-developer background. They can take this on, and it is possible. And as we'll talk at the end, the benefits from it, the impact of doing this is going to have a huge impact on your career. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this this presentation. So why is PD1 even important? So you can start from a non-technical background, but the reason it's important is it has, we've all, I'm assuming all of us are, we've been admins, we've taken the admin certification, but what PD1 gets you are the fundamental concepts to understand the platform, to understand the back end. And this is regardless of role. I see PD1 as a fundamental certification for any role. It doesn't have to just be for developer or architect. And PD1 is providing the framework for you. If you were to not have PD1, not have that exam guide and understand what topics to study, and you're just like, I'm going to learn to be a developer. Like, it would be so hard to just jump into Trailhead and go to some random resources. You wouldn't have that framework of like, what's important for the foundation of development in Salesforce. So PD1 is a great framework for that. And that's why I encourage people to take it on. And also I say it's the journey, not the destination. I know there's a big push generally for like, how many certifications do you have? And there's this whole thing about the certification itself. But really what I got out of it was not only the knowledge that I gained from studying for it, but the assurances that I felt like self-confidence from taking it, that I could take this on and I made it through the journey. So that's why I say it's the journey, not the destination, that really is what you're going to get out of this. So the first topic is motivation. Before you take this on, it's not just like, I'm going to sign up for the certification and a couple months later I'm going to study and then I'm going to take it, especially if you're coming from a non-technical background. So you have to really decide, like, what is my motivation for taking this? Why am I deciding to take PD1? Understand where you're coming from. What certifications do you have? How long have you been in the ecosystem? You need to be realistic that your background supports this journey. So I would recommend that you have at least admin and platform app builder, and that you have a few years of experience in the ecosystem. That's not to say that you couldn't come in and study really hard and maybe figure this out, but you're not, if you don't have the experience and some of that foundation, it's not going to stick, and it's going to be much harder to study for it. So you might be really excited about being a developer or taking on PD1, but you need to be realistic that you need some foundational experience and some certifications before you take this on. And also defining your end game. Why do you want to take on PD1? What's the end goal? Because having that in the back of your mind is what's going to keep you moving forward as you are studying, you're coming across unfamiliar concepts. You need to be really clear on what your goal is. And so a question I have for the audience today, I'm assuming if you are coming to this presentation, maybe you have PD1 or you've thought about taking PD1. And I'm curious for the people who are on the call, like, if you're thinking about taking PD1, what's your motivation? What is causing you to say, hey, I think I want to try and take on PD1? If you just want to, you can come off mute or feel free to throw that in the chat. Although I can't see the chat. Can I see the chat?
I think you
Okay.
can. If not, I have it and I can.
Okay. Yeah.
I can reiterate. So, I mean, I'll say, I can say for me, I have the PD1. We were, Janet and I were chatting beforehand. I've been doing this a while, and I had it from a while back, and really I took it. My background was in development, before I started with Salesforce, and really I took it as a way to learn specifics about the Salesforce platform and what was different about developing on it, because there are some major differences in developing within a governor limit, shared tenant model, that kind of thing, and what the platform does for you and what it doesn't do for you, and how you can solve things based on the Salesforce way, the way that they have the tools built out for you. So
yeah, definitely. Anybody else thinking about taking it, and what was that spark of motivation that said, hey, I think I want to take this on? Oh, I can see the chat.
okay, yeah, Sean said, why not?
Oh, well, sure, why not? Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, well, we'll move to the next item, which is, let me look at my screen here. Let me advance this.
Yeah, so Christian said, like to achieve the PD1 eventually to get more technical within Salesforce. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm curious, Christian, what your current role is. Like, what your background is, where you're coming from when you're thinking about taking on PD1.
So background is IT help desk, but then I fell in love with Salesforce and never looked back ever since. So now I'm a business analyst, working for a big company.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Here's some of the reasons. I can tell you why I was looking for it, but then here's also some of the other reasons that I've heard people talk about, and Sean just mentioned one of them. So you're looking to transition to be a developer. So this presentation is focused on people kind of coming from a non-developer background. Maybe you're an admin or a BA and you want to take it on. So maybe you're like, I want to go down that developer route. This is going to be your first, it's kind of a given that you need to have PD1. Or this was my motivation. I wanted to become a solution architect. So I was on that journey to the top of the pyramid, and it was one of the prerequisites. So my goal wasn't to become a day-to-day developer, it was to become a solution architect. So one of the things I advocate is that PD1 is important for any role, even an admin. So say you're a senior Salesforce admin, this certification is going to allow you to better understand the platform. You know, the clicks, not code, working with partners, being involved in those discussions. Like PD1 is sort of that back end functional part of the system that even it can benefit an admin. Or this also was one of my motivations. You want to be able to talk the talk as a BA or a PM. So when I say talk the talk, when I first started out, I was an admin and I also worked as a project manager, and I dealt with a really experienced development team. And they would start talking about solutions and I would get lost. I didn't understand what they were talking about. So as I progressed in my knowledge and then I eventually got PD1, I was able to be involved in those discussions and understand the impacts. So especially as a PM, understanding, you know, maybe you have some developer tasks, you understand how those are fitting into the project. And then also as a BA, your understanding is you're gathering those business requirements and you're seeing how they filter into user stories and tasks. You're understanding the context of all of it. So that's why I feel like PD1 can benefit any of these roles. So again, my motivation was I wanted to be a solution architect and I wanted to better understand the platform as a project manager. So it's kind of to point out that there isn't just this one path. People are coming from many different motivations when they're looking at PD1.
Yeah, real quick. So from the what would you how would you say the difference in content is between the admin certification and the PD1 certification in terms of the the knowledge, the areas that it focuses on?
Interesting. So I'll talk about that a little bit here, but then I also have a very specific sort of framework of the
Okay.
items. But it's and I'll talk about that a little bit here. So mindset is, okay, you know why you want to do this. Now you got to tackle this. What's your mindset? And the reason that was important for me, my journey, whoops, I went one too many. Go back. Is because it took a while. Like this was not an easy thing. I failed the first time. I had to stick with it. So my mindset really had to be focused on this. And the reason I share these items here is because you have to go into it understanding that PD1 is not like other certifications in my experience. I'm a really good test taker, like I'm a good studier. I can give me the manual, give me the documentation. I will go through it like a linear journey and I will learn everything and then I will go and take the test. What I learned with PD1 is that I had to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I was being exposed to topics that I didn't understand right away. I couldn't just read about them and then understand them. I had to get hands-on. And so what I realized is that I couldn't get frustrated when I didn't understand something right away. I had to kind of let it sit. I would go to other user group meetings. This was during the pandemic. So I could go to developer group meetings like this, like virtual meetings. I was reviewing things like Ohana Slack or the Trailhead community or socials, just seeing what people were talking about when it came to development. And also, as I'll talk about later, talking to my mentor, like my reach was broad. But I had to kind of let, I guess, the information kind of come to me. I wouldn't understand a particular concept, but as I was exposed to different things that the developers were talking about, and I talked to a mentor, they would eventually make sense. But for some people, that's frustrating. They want to understand it right away, and they may feel less self-confidence if they're not understanding it right away and feel like, well, this isn't for me. I don't understand this. I'm just going to stop. And I want to encourage people to keep going because you will find that the topics start to make sense as you continue your journey and you do these, you reach out and are on these different platforms. So it's kind of this having faith that the vague understanding will be clearer. I feel like a lot of people start to take it on, maybe get a little frustrated, and then just lose the self-confidence that they can continue with it. And so one of the other questions I had is, it seems like everyone here is like, cool, I want to take on PD1. Sometimes when I'm speaking on this topic, there are people who are like, I don't know, maybe I'll take it. And then I ask them, like, what's stopping you right now from taking it on? What in your mentally is stopping you from just signing up for that test and taking that first step? I'm just looking at the chat here. it seems like everyone here, but correct me if I'm wrong and feel free to chat or come off mute, feels comfortable knowing that they sort of want to take it on. Does anybody have any sort of doubts or something that's stopping them from taking that first step? Christian, I'm not ready yet. I'm curious. Take it even when I fail a couple times. Yes, that's a good mindset. And I'll talk about that just in a second about failing, because I did fail the first time, and I know someone who it took 6 times, but they stuck with it and they finally got it. Christian, I'm wondering why you feel you're not ready yet. Do you feel like you don't have the foundation sort of to take on some of the studying and stuff?
I have the foundation. I have the admin and platform app builder and a couple more certifications, but it's just the fear of that failing and just probably like 20% or something. No, I want to get more ready.
Yeah, I understand. And I have some resources for you, like baby steps, how to start gaining some confidence that we'll talk about here in a minute. But it does sound like you have the foundation. It is I don't want to overstate it, like it's the journey of a lifetime or something, but it is like a commitment that you have to stick with. And again, when I'm talking here about mindset, it's kind of going with the flow a little bit. There's going to be times where you're like, oh, I get it. I understand this concept. This is great. I made this trigger work. And then there'll be times where you're like, I've never touched this in my life. I had never done a Lightning web component. I had to figure out, I had to go through the documentation and, slowly figure that out. So it's kind of just keeping that positive mindset. And also with me sharing my story, knowing I went through ups and downs with it. I failed, but sticking with it had such huge benefits at the end. I guess is where I want people to sort of look to the end and understand what the benefits are going to be. So the next topic is mastery. So this is, I'll talk a little bit about how I broke these topics down, and then I have some resources that we'll talk through that hopefully will help people have some places to look for information. So the approach I took was I layered the information, is what I call it. I used Focus on Force as my sort of roadmap. Focus on Force, a lot of you are probably familiar with that, but it provided sort of the outline of the topics. The exam guide is important to read, but I feel like it's very vague. You got like 6 bullet points, like here's what you need to know. And you come away from that like, I don't know where to start with this. This is just a lot of information. So Focus on Force helped me break that down and just understand, okay, I need to understand this. I need to understand order of execution. I need to understand limits. So some of this comes from that, and some of this comes from my experience in, taking the test. So my recommendation in layering the information is you start, so here it goes, starts from the bottom and then you layer on top. You've got to have a solid foundation in the declarative. So coming off of Platform App Builder, there are definitely some questions, a few questions that are sort of Platform App Builder-like. So configuration, data model, and process automation. You've got to feel comfortable with that to start. And so some of it is just review and making sure you're comfortable with that. So like, cool, I got that first layer. I'm going on to the next thing. The next layer are the basics of coding with Salesforce. So it's data types, it's a place to start, triggers, methods, classes, and loops. Things we've all heard in passing, but things that I didn't completely understand what they were or what the components were when I started out. This is like kind of a big step, and you're learning these things and how they apply. And then once you feel comfortable with those, you're moving on to the next level, which are these 4 blue squares. These 4, I feel like, are topics on their own that you can kind of go and understand. Whereas this data types, triggers, and methods, I'm over here, is a little bit more, you got to get in there. You got to get the context of it. You got to learn how to write a trigger. These items here in this blue area are more like, you need to know the order of execution. That's a very specific topic that you can just go and figure out and understand. Or understanding SOCL and SOCL and DML, just taking that as a topic and going and understanding that. Limits. And Jason, since you've taken it, feel free to jump in with any advice. It's been a couple of years, but with limits, it's kind of there's some memorization here. There's, as you attend different talks or see different people talking about developer topics, you'll see the same limits coming up over and over again. There's some common limits you need to be aware of, but you need to, the questions are tricky.
Yeah,
it isn't going to say like, what is the limit for this? You're going to get a snippet of code, and it's going to ask you what's going to happen as a result of this. The answers might be, it's the number 1. The answer might be, you're going to hit a limit. Or the answer, I can't think of what the other options are, but they aren't going to hand it to you. You're going to have to read that. You're going to have to know that a limit applies, and then you're going to have to answer that question.
Yeah, I was going to say that the questions are very much like 3 or 4 things together. They give you, they're not going to ask you simple questions like, what's the limit for the number of, DML statements you can have in a trigger context? It's going to be, here's a trigger, what's going to happen if I do this?
Yeah, it's
You know?
very.
Yeah.
So you have to. I took this on site where I could have paper. Not. I can't imagine taking this virtually, but maybe you can. But I had to have a piece of paper where I interpreted the code and like really analyzed it to get to the right answer on that. So limits is something, unfortunately, you just have to become familiar with the common ones and just sort of memorize them. Same with the order of execution. I think it's important that you generally understand some of the big pieces of the order of execution and the why, but you're going to have to sit down and really, they will, as Jason just said, they're going to provide you with a scenario, and you're going to have to interpret the order of execution like, oh, maybe there's recursion happening because of this, or you're going to have to interpret that. So those are 2 areas where it's just like old book studying, like really understanding. SOCL, SOSL, and DML, I feel like I should come up with some of the reference material for this, but there's a lot of good resources out there that just review SOCL, that just like SOCL for admins. There's presentations about just like starting to get your hand around it and playing with it. So I felt like this was a fairly approachable topic because, I could look at a resource, I could go and practice it. It made sense. And I was like, okay, I'm good with that. Testing, debugging, and deployment. I felt, and again, Jason, it's chime in here. This was fairly straightforward, but it meant going in and playing around with this and just understanding like the developer console and all the different areas of it. I don't really remember the deployment questions specifically, but then testing was definitely involved here.
Yeah, it's been a few years since I got mine, so I'm sure the deployment stuff has changed because it was like Ant deployment and
Yeah, it was,
and stuff like that, or deploying from Eclipse, which you're not going to do that anymore. You're going to use SFDX to deploy, or you're going to do a change set, stuff like that. Yeah, the developer console is a beast. It does a lot of stuff, and they ask a lot of questions about what it can and what you can do with it. And there's pieces of it I'm even like, it does that. I didn't know it did that.
And I learned so much in that area. The different tabs, I was like, I had no idea that it would do this. So that part was super helpful.
Yeah, I know for the advanced one, if you guys want to continue on that track, they go even further into the like performance metrics you can do with the developer console, and looking at queries and seeing how what their execution timing is and stuff like that. You can get real detailed with it.
But that's cool, and this is an area where I think, wow, if you're an admin, like a senior admin, or somebody who's just doing hands-on stuff, like just understand like the things that you learn from studying from this, that alone, some SOCL, understanding the order of execution and like the deployment stuff, that's key. It's gonna improve your job for sure. So I kind of categorize these 4 as like these distinct things that you can go and learn. You can go and learn them right now. They're not crazy. You can learn those things once you have this basis down. The next level, so for me, this was the part where I didn't have a lot of experience. I knew Visualforce just because we had a lot of Visualforce pages, and I understood the concept and some of the structure to it. But these are the UI. This is the UI part. And the funny thing is right before I took it the first time, they upped the percentage for the UI. It's like 25% now. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's huge. You think a lot of you may think that a lot of the development is this backend stuff, but a lot of it has to do with the UI and pushing Lightning Web Components. So this became a big piece of the puzzle. This is where you have to get hands-on. And so that's why I kind of put this up here as the next level. Like you're feeling comfortable with the basics of code and deployment. And now, okay, you might be launched into something that's new. Visualforce, there's really good documentation on this though, that really walks you through the components of Visualforce, the Lightning components. I don't know how many questions there still are on Aura, but there definitely were 1 or 2 when I took the test a couple of years ago. Maybe that's being phased out. And then for sure, Lightning Web Components, there are questions. This was one of the areas when I first took the test that I was low on. And so when I failed it, it's one of the areas I went back and really got more hands-on. Again, the documentation I thought was super helpful on this. And really this is about from what I remember is the building blocks of this. When to use it, where it's applicable, and what are the building blocks to building these was the key. So while it sort of scared me a little bit coming from a non-development background, you aren't asked, it's not like you're giving a blank screen and asked to like build a Lightning Web component. You just need to understand where it fits in and what the building blocks are. So don't let that scare you off. And again, there's a lot of really good hands-on resources to take that on. And then at the top, I threw in these miscellaneous items, which can get you in the test. System classes, there's a big long list, and you may be asked which one is the right one in a certain situation. So it's, again, just sort of reading through that. Platform events, I remember a few questions on that. And since I've taken the test, platform events have become even more, you hear a lot more about them. People are using them for a lot more things. Security vulnerabilities, definitely 1 or 2 questions on that. But I felt like, especially focused on Force, they focused on what those questions might be, and I felt pretty comfortable with them, just kind of memorizing what the cross-site scripting and some other things, like they point that out to you. And then one of the things that's hard is best practices. I feel like they were asking questions and there were 2 answers that were technically right, but one of them was more of a best practice. And they aren't going to be really clear when they're asking you that. So that's one of the little tricky things, is you kind of have to know what some of the best practices are. And the way I gained that was trailheads, and also, again, going to different meetings and hearing you. I started to hear the same things over and over when I was looking at conversations on social media. People would bring up the same best practices. So those started to get ingrained. So this is sort of the approach that I took, and hopefully breaking this down makes it it's a lot, of course, but hopefully it makes it a little more approachable. Instead of just thinking, oh, wow, I have to go study for PD1. Here's what you need. This is how you break it down. And don't focus on the entire thing. Like, figure out one thing at a time and start to layer your information. And I think that will give you some self-confidence as you sort of work your way up, that you're getting it, you're going through this, and you're checking off the different topics. Any questions about this definitely questions at any point and questions at the end, but wondering if you have any questions about this particular slide. No. Okay, let's talk about resources. And some of these, I'm going to talk about all of these because there's so many great resources, and they've even increased since I took the test. So you're starting out square one and you're like, cool, where do I even start? I don't even know what a trigger is. I don't know anything. I recommend that you start with David Liu's Apex Academy. And I'm going to, at the end here, I'll give you links to all of these, the ones that have web addresses. David Liu's Apex Academy is for people who are absolute beginners. It will take you through writing a very simple hello world trigger. And I feel like that starts to give you that self-confidence. Like, you can write a trigger. You can do it. Anybody can do it. You just need some explanation and some practice. And it sort of gets you over that hump of, can I be a developer? It gives you some confidence there. The next item I put, this presentation has been around for a couple of years, but any of the Dreamforcers or Trailblazer DXs, and now that there is Salesforce Live, there are tons of presentation recordings. I know Adam Olshansky does one on Apex for admins. David Liu's done a few. People do these presentations where they're like, okay, you're an admin. Here's how you take those first steps into Apex. Lots of great presentations out there on that. So search for those. The other beginning type of website is a website called Women Code Heroes. This is the website that Rad Women Code uses in their coding cohorts. And I'll talk about Rad Women Code here in a minute. But it was very straightforward, explained like, what are data types? They're a different container that expects this type of thing inside of it. It's a very approachable way to look at things. And it's written by Kieran Jameson, who's one of the founders of Rad Women Code and now works for Salesforce. It's a great beginner website, so I really recommend that one. And then from there, you're like, okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this. I got focus on force, doing a couple trailheads. I'm feeling a little bit more confident on this. Rad Women Code, if you've heard of that, is a cohort-based opportunity that comes around twice a year. I think it's twice a year. And it's for women or those who consider themselves women, can't think of the right word there, who it's to increase women developers is really what the original intent of it was over the years. You apply, there's a lottery to get in because there's so many people. You work in small cohorts and go through different examples, and you work with your cohort. It's like 4 people and you have 2 coaches. It was definitely the catalyst for me to gain confidence and also a safe space to just ask questions. You felt safe just asking what you thought might be silly questions, and came out of that definitely with the confidence to take on PD1. Again, I have links to all these that I'll put in the chat. If you've heard of the group Ladies Be Architects, they have an awesome YouTube channel that has so many recordings on it that are really helpful. In particular, there's a playlist called Platform Developer Study Playlist. That's a great resource that goes over the different areas. Trailhead Live used to have modules. I need to see if those are still available. I think Trailhead has stopped doing as many Trailhead Live sessions, but they used to do Trailhead Lives on the different areas that were really focused and really helpful. Another group that's got a huge YouTube channel, they're called Apex Hours, if you've heard of them. They have a Salesforce developer training playlist. You can see that there's just massive resources out there. And then of course, Focus on Force, which is what I used. Salesforce resources, of course, Trailhead. They used to, I don't know if they're still doing them, they used to have certification days, and they had one for PD1, and it was a couple of hours, and they would go through all of the topics on PD1. I'd recommend if you do one of those that you do it at the end of your studying, because it's really a synopsis and just reinforcing some of the things you know. I wouldn't do that first thing, because it's just going to be sort of over your head, because none of the information is going to stick. And then, of course, if your employer will sponsor it or you have some money in the bank, you can take one of the Trailhead virtual boot camps or Dev 450 class with a Salesforce instructor. Like that I never did that, but that would be awesome. That would really fill in some gaps. And then things like this, ongoing webinars and user group content. There's so many virtual meetings out there. Look for different dev groups and the topics that they're talking about. That's where the things that I didn't understand started to solidify as I started to go to those. So I really, really recommend those as resources. Then what I want to focus on here about reading the documentation. So talk a little bit about my journey of taking the test. I failed the first time, but what's nice about it was I was able to see the areas I was weak in. And then I also had a sense of what the test involved, because it is different. It's different than the admin and the platform app builder. And so I came away from it actually with some confidence. I'm like, oh, I've got this. I only need to get a few more questions right. There's things I wasn't sure I knew, but it really helped solidify that I did know them. And then I was able to identify the areas that I was weak on. And so, as I mentioned before, I went back and worked on some of the UI items. But the other thing I did was I went through and read all of this documentation just from the beginning, every page, just read through it. And 2 things I found from that, the documentation is much more approachable than you think it is. You think it's going to be highly technical. You're not going to understand it. It's written very plainly and very understandable. And as I was going through it, I found many questions from the test in there. Just sentence, I was be like, oh, that was a question on the test. Oh, that was a question on the test. So they're pulling those questions straight from this documentation. So I would recommend this not at the beginning, but as you've gone through and you feel like, okay, I'm getting ready, I've got these, I feel good about all the topics. I know it sounds, some people are like, oh my God, I'm not going to read all that. I promise you it's the key to those little details that are contained in the documentation. Especially if you fail the first time, go back and read the documentation. It's got, like here, it's got the limits, you got platform events. The Apex Developer Guide has all of the best practices. So this is my big takeaway here, read the documentation. And then also don't forget, if you're Twitter is a great place to just be involved, follow people, see what they're talking about. Slack, there's Ohana Slack. They have different channels for developer. I spend a lot of time daily perusing these things just to see what people are talking about. Somebody had a question. Oh, I wonder what the answer was to that. Oh, now I understand that better. Or I can go there and ask a question and someone will answer that. So just being sort of aware of what's going on really helped me. And there's also a Discord channel called SFXD that's a big Discord channel. It's got a lot of really technical people on there who are super helpful that, again, watch what they're asking and answering, but also you can ask questions on. So I'll pause there, just went on my whole resources list, and see if anybody else has any resource suggestions or questions about the resources that I mentioned.
Yeah, I would just say I used Focus on Force as well. They have not just the PD1, they have resources for almost all of the certifications at this point out there, and they're really good. It's they have sample tests that are similar enough to the real exam, and the nice thing is you can do it in like interactive mode where you answer the question and then it'll tell you were you right or wrong, and it'll tell you exactly in the documentation, here's where the answer was, here's why this is the answer. It's not just, oh, you got that one wrong. It's, well, here's the documentation, this is why this is the answer. I thought
that
that was
really
really
helped
cool.
me. Understanding why I got it wrong was like the key.
Yeah.
So that that really helps. So I definitely agree there.
Yeah, I
And
would
then
reiterate too, it's you learn a lot from failing it, which sounds weird. They used to not tell you, they used to only tell you pass fail, which was really frustrating.
Yeah.
And thankfully they've given you now where they tell you, here's how you did in each of the areas, so that when the idea is I can take it again and know what to focus on. So
Yeah, that's super helpful. I see Ben mention this, and that is actually a really good call out about that resource. I've definitely seen that come up. The coding with the force has definitely come up a lot more. So that, I think I'm going to add that to the presentation, because I do think that that is a really good resource. New resources coming every day. Lots of content creators out there. So definitely available. So thanks for that, adding that one, Ben. And then more resources. I wrote an article about this topic for Salesforce Ben. It pretty much covers what I've just talked about, but if you need to go back and review anything, there's an article there. And then I also helped them, this was probably 2 years ago, and then we updated it a little bit, update their Platform Developer 1 certification guides and tips, kind of just breaking down the, the layering a little bit more, breaking that out a little bit more, and adding some more resources in there for each of the topics, like specific places you can go to learn about each of those topics. So that I'll include the links to that too, but that is a helpful, hopefully, resource for everybody. And then my last M is mentor. This played a big role for me. Having a mentor played a huge role for me in feeling confident and having somebody to go to. So the things I like to point out about this, because I also mentor people, not on PD1 specifically, like the technical topics, but I'm a mentor to people like who are entering the ecosystem and that type of thing. And so this applies to that too. I feel like the role of a mentor, especially with PD1, isn't to be your teacher, isn't for you to show up every week for an hour and have them just start explaining topics to you. They're there to your responsibility is to go and prepare, is to study, and is to identify those areas that you have questions on. Come back to them with specifics, like, I don't understand this particular topic. Here's where I'm confused. Can you help me understand that? And the reason I say that is if you approach someone to be a mentor and you're very specific with what you need from them, they're more apt to do it than if you just say, hey, can you be my mentor? And there's no expectations. Everybody's really busy and they want to know what their time commitment is. So I think if you come to it very specific, you've studied, you have some areas you're confused about, they can help explain that or find resources for you. That's the best way to sort of work with a mentor and respect their time and get the most out of it. Where to find a mentor is a good question. I was lucky enough to work with a senior software engineer that I was able to use as a mentor. So definitely look at where you're currently working. That's a really good place. I know we're virtual, but maybe you're working with somebody who can help you with this journey. Local user groups, of course. Also, if you go to any events like community events or Trailblazer DX or Dreamforce is another way to look for or get people to recommend somebody that can help you. And then also just the community in general on Twitter or Ohana Slack, finding those people who, even if they're not your ongoing mentor, they can help you with a particular topic. So I think what I want to say about having a mentor is you're not in it alone. You don't have to, there were definitely times with Rad Women Code, we were given a final project. So you had a blank screen, you had this final project, and I was like, I don't know where to begin. I'm like, I'm just going to give up on this. I don't know where to begin with this. I'm super confused. Come to find out, everybody else in my group was the same way, and we were able to work together, help each other break it down and then get over that hump. So you don't have to sit in the corner by yourself and study for this test. There's mentors out there in the community that are there to help get you over those little humps because you're going to come across topics that you don't understand. So mentor is definitely a key, I think. Oh yeah, good call out with the mentorship that Salesforce sponsors. So here's sort of this was after I took PD1, I passed it. I was still working as a PM and an admin at that point. I hadn't started down my solution architect journey quite yet, although this was the beginning of it. And this passing PD1 had an immediate impact in not only my self-confidence, but in my ability to do my role. And again, I promote PD1 as something that's important for any role. So kind of what I wanted to point out here is, what are you going to get for all this trouble that you went through to learn the topics of PD1? As an admin, it's the decisions of clicks versus code. Should it be a flow? Should it be a trigger? Why? Troubleshooting. You may not be able to, you can come through PD1 and not necessarily be able to go and just write a trigger like day one, but you can look at a trigger and you can understand pieces of it. And so you don't have to go to the developer to ask them questions. As an admin, when you're troubleshooting or providing support, you have a better concept. As a project manager, for me at that time, I was able to understand the complexity of a solution and the necessary resource time. I used to ask the developers or the architects, you're saying this is going to take 20 hours, but I look at this and I like, this looks like a really simple trigger. Like, what am I missing here? Why is this going to take so long? After I took PD1, I understood all of, like, oh, we need test coverage and all this stuff. Like, I was able to better interact with my peers at work and developers because I knew what they were talking about. And I was also able to ask questions and challenge their solutions, which also helps you learn. So they would say, we're going to do it this way. And I would say, well, why did you do it that way? Oh, because of this, we got this limit. This is going to happen. It really helped me understand it. So I felt like it was more in the mix. And I wasn't just I'm the PM, I'm taking the tasks and I'm scheduling them. I felt more empowered. As an architect, I mean, it's key to have PD1. But having it gives you a deeper involvement in solutioning and brainstorming. You're able to put your opinion in there. You're able to understand what other people are saying. You're able to make suggestions. And that's how you learn as an architect, is sort of brainstorming. Like, I think this, why do you think that? You start to understand how people come to certain solutions and what best practices are. You're able to understand the code solutions that are being discussed more deeply. And you can propose solutions and understand what their impact is. And as an architect, that's what's important. You have a solution, but you have to understand what are the ramifications of that? What's the impact? And going through PD1 is really going to help you with that. And then, of course, as a developer, it's sort of a given that you should have PD1. So you're on your way and you've got a solid foundation in Salesforce. In my opinion, it depends on the person. You could come through and you've taken PD1. I don't know that day one you could be like, I'm going to get a developer job now. I can do hands-on work. I think that you need, if you're coming from a non-technical background, I think you need some more hands-on experience and some experience across different areas to really be like, okay, I'm going to be a developer now. If you're going somewhere that doesn't have like a mentor or something, but it's definitely the foundation for becoming a developer. So I think it's important to just say, like, what are you going to get for all this trouble? You're going to get a lot. It's going to give you some different avenues that you can go in the Salesforce ecosystem, project manager, architect, developer. It really expands your horizons, and kind of just enforcing that with all the work you're putting into this, the impact is huge. Taking PD1 is what started me on my architect journey. I was able to build on my experience, get a job as a solution architect, and now I've been able to work that into being the manager of solution architecture at a partner. And really, it all started with taking on PD1. So I think it's a great catalyst for your career. So that's my take on it. I wish you the best of luck on your PD1 journey, and I'm always cheering people on social media if they have questions, or especially when they pass. Super excited to help cheer everybody on.
Awesome. Thank you, Janet. This was a really good presentation. I really appreciate all the depth and detail you put in here. Anybody else have any questions or anything you wanted to ask Janet here before we wrap up?
I'm going to post I'm not sure if I'm still sharing or how I stop sharing.
Here,
oh, there we go.
Yeah, there's a little.
You can. Oh, there we go. Stop share. I have too
many
windows open. I want to put in all of the. Well, let's see. Did it put them all in? Yeah. Here's a big long list, and Jason will capture them. But this is a list of all of the links to Women Code Heroes, certification guide, 0 to PD1 articles, and Rad Women Code. Two things I wanted to be sure to mention. Rad Women Code's next cohort is coming up, and you have to go to an introductory session before you can get in the lottery. So if that's something that you or someone who would qualify that's interested, go to radwomen.org, and it's got information. And then the other thing, a little plug, Kicksaw, which is where both Ben and I work, we have open positions. We have a developer position, we have project manager, solution architect positions. So take a look, and if you or anybody you know is interested, feel free to reach out and I can answer any questions or give them a referral link.
Awesome. Again, thank you, Janet. This was a great presentation. Thank you all for joining. And just a reminder, next month we have a session with Michelle Regal on flows, a triggering experience. She'll be going over when to use what, whether to use a trigger, use a flow, or how these all kind of play together in different automation tools within Salesforce. So it should be a really good one. I'm really excited about this one as well for next month. So hopefully I'll see you all then. Thanks again for joining, and wish you all a good rest of your evening. Take care. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone.